folks. This is Dr. Emily Scherning with American Resiliency. I am really excited to introduce a guest today. This is Jackie Ryan. She's a NASA engineer who has done incredible work as a volunteer for our community, developing her visualization of the NCA5 datasets. Jackie, we are all so grateful to you, and I really appreciate this opportunity for you to show us around this tool that you've designed.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here and glad to be supporting the community. So I'd love to dive right into the tool if that's all right.
Let's do it. Do you mind pulling it up on your screen? I'll let you drive this part of the tour.
What I've been working on here is the comprehensive visualization of the NCA5 data as part of the NCA5 report that was created back in 2022. And so the data
Just to give a
itself.
little context to our viewers, this is the source material. The NCA5 data sets are the source material for both the state level outlooks on the channel here and the regional outlooks. So this information is the information that powers the outlooks for American resiliency.
Right. And that data was provided to the public for free, not just in the PDF reports themselves, but also as raw data, which I've been able to process and represent on this website here. This website is actually my own personal website. If you go here, this is the landing page, although you can also access it directly using this URL. It's just jackiepie.xyz/NCA Atlas. And the map that opens up right away that you're going to see is centered on the continental United States. And it's going to show us the metric that we're looking at, as well as a color scale and the current warming level that we're looking at. And these warming levels go between 1.5 degrees Celsius all the way up
Just
to
where we
4
are
degrees
now, right?
Celsius. Yeah, we're more or less at 1.5 degrees Celsius right now. Although, per the IPCC, these are based off of rolling averages of a number of years. So, in terms of the rolling average itself, we haven't necessarily reached 1.5 degrees Celsius yet.
This is a
Um,
good point, and I think that it's really useful as we try to understand this policy level debate of whether it matters or not, that for more than a year now, the planet has been at or above the 1.5C threshold. I think that it's important that as we try to connect with the climate science, many of us, if you look at the 1.5C map for different factors, it will account for how much hotter the last 2 years have felt. It accounts for the differences that we're feeling on the ground now. So when we look at the 2C information, that helps us have some certainty that this is at least going to point us in the right direction.
so, just a couple of features, just looking at this default metric, which is the number of days over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. When you hover over individual counties, you're able to see the value of that metric for the specific county that you're interested in. So, for example, for Los Angeles County, where I live, we can see that at 2 degrees Celsius, we will be experiencing 8.7 days over, in this case, it's the 1990 to 2020 baseline, an additional 8.7 days over 100 degrees per year. If your data itself is actually beyond what's shown on the scale here, so for instance, in South Texas, they're getting even more than 30 days of additional days over 100 degrees Fahrenheit per year. And so if I increase the color scale here, I can do this with my arrow keys, or I can type in the number that I'm interested in. You can adjust it if this color scale is not to your liking.
That's
Um,
so cool. So you can really refine your range to capture edge effects here. Jackie, this is so fancy. I'm so excited we're doing this because I've played with this tool a lot and I had not explored this additional feature.
Being able to adjust the color scale is really important to get out those subtle gradations in the data. So that was a feature that I wanted to make sure that I had. Another thing is, if this color scale is not to your liking, when you hover over, you might notice this arrow appear. When you click on it, you'll be able to actually change the color scale to whatever your preference is.
That's such a
Similarly,
wonderful accessibility feature. Thank you so much for putting that into this tool.
yeah, similarly, when you click on this metric right here, for instance, this is the number of days over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. We have all of the options of available metrics in the National Climate Atlas. So, for instance, I could look at annual average temperature change. In this case, we're seeing, 2.79 degrees Fahrenheit of temperature increase at 2 degrees Celsius of warming. Admittedly, this is a little confusing due to the mismatch of units. And that's something that I'm going to be working on improving in the future, the ability to change units. But for now, you can change which variable you're using by using this dropdown right here. Now, you may have also noticed that there's an additional dropdown to the left of the variable. And this metric allows you to see the change in annual average temperature, which is the default for all the metrics in the National Climate Atlas. Or you can see the total. This is a terminology that I came up with myself, and it's to refer to a limitation that I noticed in the Climate Atlas, which is the data as it was provided did not contain the 1991 to 2020 normals that it was comparing against for all of the metrics that were provided. In the absence of the team that produced the atlas in the first place providing that data, I produced it myself for the variables that I was able to do so. And one of the bugs I would say that I still need to work out is the color map scale does not adjust automatically. So you'll notice everything is white now. There's nothing wrong here. It's just that because I'm showing the actual temperature that will be on average in a given county at 2 degrees Celsius, it's a way higher number. So if I adjust this to about 65 degrees, and on the low end, I put maybe 55 degrees, I need to adjust it a little higher.
Let's try and get a plain language statement about what this is that we're visualizing here, because this is really very innovative and important, what you've pulled out.
So what we're looking at right now, I mentioned I changed from the change in annual average temperature to total annual average temperature. In the field of climate science, what we call a climate normal is an average that is taken of a particular metric, such as temperature, over a 30-year period. And this gives climate scientists a baseline of what's going on. In my case, I calculated using all of the weather station data in the United States what the annual average temperature between 1991 and 2020 was. And then I added that to the value in the climate atlas. And this allows me to specify what the annual average temperature at 2 degrees Celsius, or about in the year 2040 to 2050, would look like.
So, what you're doing here is letting us look not at relative change, but as the projected total at that time point. And I'm curious, with your use of 2C 2040 2050 language, do you think that we are still on a timeline where we could still be talking about 2C towards mid-century?
I don't know if I'm the best person to answer that question. I try to stick to what work climate modelers are doing. The climate atlas itself that was created is a bit interesting because it's been reformulated to be outputs at specific global warming levels. Typically, with model outputs, we output at individual years and then
Hmm.
aggregate those into 30-year periods. So we can say approximately in X year, across many models, we will reach 2 degrees Celsius of warming. This atlas makes no claim about when certain thresholds will be crossed. And I simply don't have the tools to model that for myself. So I essentially defer to what CMIP 6 would say about crossing points for certain thresholds of warming.
I think that's an extremely clear and legit take. And that being able to say when we know we don't know is one of the greatest levels of discernment that we can reach. I think that's very cool. I want to make sure that we have a minute to talk about the next expansion that you plan to do on this work because I think it's so exciting.
Yeah, so originally the direction that I wanted to go was just to fill out everything that I possibly could for the US data. So one thing that you're going to notice when you use this tool a bit more, these total metrics are only available for certain variables, and I haven't clearly indicated at this time which ones they're available for and which ones they aren't. So I have done it for annual average temperature. It's available for annual precipitation. That's in inches, which is helpful because the change metric itself from the report is as a
Yes.
percentage.
Yes.
Um,
That's a startlingly different climb for change in total there. Very cool.
yeah, if I could go into a bit how this was actually done, I'm not sure how much folks out there really care, but I want to just emphasize that I'm not out here making things up. I have a real methodology about how I'm going about this. So in the GIS field, we use a tool called QGIS, which is used for viewing various types of maps. And so in my case, I created custom maps from NOAA's NCEI dashboard. So each individual weather station, you can imagine, is like a pin in this map of the United States. And if we zoom out, I actually did have weather station information for Alaska, Puerto Rico, and Hawaii as well. But unfortunately, the climate atlas itself does not necessarily contain change data for those states and territories. So that data may not be available for those regions in the website as it currently is today. So given all those limitations, the normals need to be generated themselves, and not all municipalities, states, so on and so forth are available. I wanted to try to regenerate this for the entire world using a consistent methodology. So first I'll go back and just show you what I generated. So here we have a map of the continental US with all of the weather stations from the NOAA NCEI data mapped onto what we call a gridded raster. And so I've performed a calculation that averages out all of the information from all of these weather stations into a smooth interpolation across the United States, accounting for elevation. The reason why I'm able to do this is because if you figure a weather station in one city and a weather station 10 kilometers away in the next city over, those values for temperature and precipitation are not going to be that different from each other. And so if there's no data in between those 2 points, we can just smoothly interpolate between them. Where that starts to become tricky is in areas that have a lot of elevation change, such as in the Western United States. And so here you can see there's a lot more variation that we need to account for. For instance, the Central Valley is appearing in this part of the raster. The Puget Sound area is surrounded by mountains on both sides. And these mountains receive a lot more precipitation than the valley itself. Often it comes in the form of snow. And so using these maps, I was able to average the pixels down to a county level to get the metric that is actually being displayed to you in this map over here. And so you can see, for instance, King County, where Seattle is, receives about 77 inches of rain per year in the 2 degrees Celsius of warming scenario. And so I was actually able to generate these metrics for many of the climate metrics that are specified in the National Climate Atlas data, but importantly, not for all of them. For example, extreme precipitation, the amount of precipitation on wettest days, for example, that data is not directly available in weather station data.
Hmm.
And so I would have to calculate that myself using daily records for the 1991 to 2020 period. Given those challenges and the fact that this methodology is only available for the United States in the first place because it relies on NOAA weather stations, in the future, I'm going to move to a different approach. And so that different approach is to use the climate models themselves. Um, Specifically, we have something called CMIP6, which is what the National Climate Atlas was based on. CMIP6 is not actually a specific climate model. The acronym stands for Coupled Model Intercomparison Project. And the intercomparison is the important part. So it's actually about 25 to 35 models from different teams around the world, and they all get assembled together into an average to essentially split the difference of the uncertainty across all of these different science teams and give a estimate of what future climate scenarios will look like. And like I said, these model outputs were used for generating the National Climate Assessment, along with lots of other climate projections in other countries.
Yeah, we see the World Bank is often using CMIP6 when we're looking at the international outlooks on the channel.
And these projects get updated about every 10 years. CMIP 7, the successor, will likely be coming out in the next few years, but it's still a little bit of a ways off. So in the meantime, it's still reasonable to use CMIP 6, even despite some of the accelerations in warming that we might be observing in the past few years. So one of the really great data sets that exists out there that I'm going to be taking advantage of is produced by NASA, and it's called NEXT GDDP CMIP 6. They already have a dashboard available, although I don't find it particularly user-friendly personally. So I'm reinterpreting the data myself. I can
That's
show you
so
the
cool.
dashboard a little bit if you guys are interested in diving into it. I can pull up a specific climate scenario, such as SSP 5 8.5, and this can show me at what we call a 25-kilometer gridded resolution, what various climate projections will look like on a monthly cadence. I'm not sure exactly which dates I'm comparing here, but
If you're having difficulty figuring out what this is displaying, I feel a compassion for the rest of us. I think that means it is likely not going to be friendly for lower level users such as myself. But we're looking at global information here. And what you're talking about is making a more accessible visualization of global information, right?
exactly. And so this data itself is incredibly valuable if only it were presented in a little more accessible of a format. So, for instance, on the left, what we're looking at here are CMIP6 variables themselves, which are not super user friendly if you're not in the climate modeling community. For instance, I happen to know that PR stands for precipitation, and the unit that CMIP6 uses for precipitation is not a very layperson friendly one. It's kilograms per meter squared second.
To say that's not really user friendly is a adorable minimization.
An important thing for me to do in translating this data into a format that's more familiar to a layperson is to take those units and convert them and aggregate them and provide them at a spatially aggregated format as well. And that's a very technical term. What I mean by spatially aggregated is when you zoom into this, you'll notice that this raster appears very pixelated.
Right,
This is
but it's
actually
actually like got a 25-kilometer resolution, right? 25-kilometer squared resolution.
each pixel is about 25 kilometers squared.
Okay.
And in climate modeling, that's actually an increase in resolution over what the models were generated at. Um,
Oh,
so there's a lot of reasons why climate models are very coarse like that, but it turns out it's not actually the purpose of climate models to model very, very fine scale spatial differences in these metrics. And so 25-kilometer resolution is acceptable when we're talking about individual counties or individual states, what the climate outlook looks like for them. To avoid the appearance of this pixelization, I like to aggregate things down to this county level. Because when you look at individual counties, you're not noticing that the data is a coarse, pixelated image. You've essentially optimized that out.
well, then it helps
You're
to give it to us in a way that connects with our lives. And
right.
getting this precious data from a place that is so inaccessible to a place where people can use it to build resilience and make decisions about their lives. I cannot say what a gift and act of service this is, this project that you're working on, especially if we're able to get this kind of information so accessible to the individual for information around the globe. Right now, what you have done to create access to the NCA 5 is incredible. And that already is not helping people in, say, Hawaii, where I'm working on a script to look at the overview for the islands in the US states and territories. We're not able to look at this quality of visualization data for them, this county level visualization. But what you're saying, just to put it in really clear language, is that that information is out there and that we need you to help us to see it, to help us to see it in a way that we can connect. And I hope that everyone who's watching this is also sending you good thoughts and intense gratitude for helping us access this critical information.
And another thing I'd like to say is I hope that this can be an open call to the American resiliency community. If there's anybody who's interested in this topic and is also a software developer, even if you're not a software developer who's familiar with climate science or working with this type of data, I really encourage you to reach out to me so that this can be a community effort where we're really building and improving these tools together.
It is a wonderful statement of leadership on your part to work to bring people together on this. There are so many of us who bring many different gifts to the table as we face these more challenging conditions that are coming. I think this is a wonderful and important opportunity where people can contribute their gifts to help the community be able to respond to change. Jackie, thank you so much. And this is like the coolest thing ever that you've done already, that you are now going to further accelerate this awesomeness. This is like not just a level up you're talking about. This is like leveling up 5 times this plan that you have here. I'm so excited to see where it goes. And I really hope that you get some good help, some good additions to your team from our making this video.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Emily.
Jackie, I'm so grateful that we connected. And thank you so much for being here today. Folks, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. I always like a peek under the hood, and I so admire this work Jackie is doing. I consider it to be just next level. The promise and potential of these next steps she's going to take, if she's able to accessibly visualize that global data, that tool is going to be just transformative to the stories we can tell here on the channel. And I want to thank everyone, all of you in the AR community, for your support. AR is a donor funded organization, and as you can see in this video, our volunteers also play a huge role in bringing the community high quality information. I am so grateful for you all. Thanks for spending some time with us today, and talk with you again soon.